Welcome back to the Capes and Tights podcast right here on capesandtights.com. I'm your host, Justin Soderberg. This episode is once again brought to you by our friends over at Galactic Comics and Collectibles at galacticcomicsandcollectibles.com and now at 499 Hammond Street in Bangor, Maine, but it's always on the website, so check that out. We welcome back Jude Ellison S. Doyle, who is an author, journalist, and comic book writer known for their work on Boom Studios series such as Ma, The Neighbors, Be Not Afraid, and his latest comic book series, Dead Teenagers, which hits local comic book shops on March 18th, 2026 from Oni Press. Jude's here to discuss Dead Teenagers, a little bit about Be Not Afraid, and so much more right here on this episode of the podcast. But before you listen, follow us on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, Blue Sky, Threads, and all those places. You can rate, review, subscribe over on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you find your podcasts. And the video portion's available over on youtube.com as well as capesandtights.com. But also visit capesandtights.com for so much more. This is comic book writer, journalist, and book writer, and author, Jude Ellison S. Doyle, chatting Dead Teenagers right here on the Capes and Tights podcast. Enjoy. Welcome back. Belated welcome back to the podcast, Jude. How are you today?
I am doing really well. Thanks so much for having me. It's great to be back.
Yes, like I said before we started recording, I was like, oh, 3 years. I think that's crazy. There's certain people who are like, chomping at the bit or have so much going on or so many comics that they're like emailing me like, can I get on again? I need to promote my comic. But I'm like, dude, you were on 3 weeks ago. like let's space it out a little bit. And I've learned 3 years is too long.
Olympics,
yes, know? Exactly. 3 years is too long. However, I have learned from other podcasts where they like make a not a hard fast rule, but like a quasi rule of once a year. And I was like, I could see that, like, once every 9 months, maybe 10, 12 months, 13 months, but 3 years is too long. So welcome back. I'm glad you were here. We talked last time about The Neighbors, which was a hit from me. And then in the between time, you have had Be Not Afraid, which just finished up. The sixth issue released on February 25th, and I was lucky enough to read the entire trade a couple weeks ago, and I loved it. Fantastic. It was fantastic. It was dark. It was you. It fit your style of writing and storytelling, which was excellent. But you have another comic book coming up here pretty soon called Dead Teenagers, which I've always said to my local comic book shop, like, if titles aren't the way you order something, like covers maybe, how you look at solicitations, but I'm like, if you don't order Dead Teenagers based just on the title, I am going to be mad at you. Forget who's writing it, who's illustrating it, forgetting that stuff. Like, it's the same thing with Fred Kennedy had a comic book come out recently called The Florida Hippopotamus Cocaine Massacre.
Yeah.
And I was like, I don't understand how you don't order that.
It says what it's going to be, and you know that you need to be part of that. You need to be part of its becoming.
Yes, exactly. I mean, there's other comic books like right now, a hit comic book or a very reselling comic book, White Sky over at Image is like this comic book that came out, and like the second day it came out, it's like a $50 comic book on eBay or whatever. It's crazy. But White Sky isn't very like, I've got to order that comic book. Dead Teenagers, I feel like, fits that category. Do you agree?
I would say, yeah, it's very upfront and very callous in its titling, and hopefully it I named it that because slashers, Roger Ebert called them dead teenager movies, because that's what happens. It's just like teenagers get fed into the wood chipper. And I kind of wanted to actually pull back the focus to the titular dead teenagers. I always get so obsessed with like random little side characters in slashers, like not even like, let's talk about maybe the defining cinematic achievement of its day, I Still Know What You Did Last Summer, where there's just like, Brandy is there and Jennifer Love Hewitt is there, and they're very admirable, but there's also Jack Black in like his first motion picture performance doing a fake Jamaican accent as a weed dealer. And it's, I think, he probably wishes it were erased from reality, but I want to know more about that man. I want his prequel.
Exactly. I want that story. Well, it was actually kind of funny. I was
origin story.
Just talking to my brother-in-law about how there's so many first appearances or just like cameos in X-Files. Like I'm rewatching the X-Files over
Yes.
again. They're like I want to do an article on the website about like the number of people who have been like famous people who have been on the X-Files before they were famous. I mean, I was
Yes.
just watching one with Shia LaBeouf in it, who's
Oh
this
my
kid, a
God.
kid who has cancer and he's like in a bed and that's him. And then there's like Ryan Reynolds is in the beginning of one for like 3 minutes. This is like high school teenager, and it's just like the number of people who have been like just in these things. And Jack Black's actually been in an episode of X
Yeah, Jack
Files.
Black and Giovanni Ribisi, the Lightning
Yes,
Kid
yes,
episode,
yes. And
which
it's like
I
that's
thought
just
was cinema, in
yes.
its day.
I'm like, and now he's a multi-millionaire playing like Super Mario characters on TV and so on. But
Yeah.
but yeah, yeah, the side of this characters, but they say yeah, dead teenagers that connects, that works, that makes it sense.
Yeah.
Just to get us started, what is dead teenagers to people like this specific story? Like obviously without spoiling anything.
Yeah, I know. It's hard because this is the first thing I've written where you could really like spoil it. But it's a story about five teenagers who have been going to prom night in 1997 for about 30 years. And they die every single time they go to prom night. And it's always something new. It's always some new horrific monster, which is great because I get to just like throw in any monster I want at any time, which is amazing. But it's also a story about how they are trying to figure out how they get caught in this loop. And at a certain point, something they do breaks the loop a little bit. It starts to work differently as they get closer to the secret.
Perfectly explained for at least for
Yeah.
the first issue for me. I think it's funny because I've read all of your stuff, your comic book stuff, and it's like this is slightly different in a
Yeah.
sense. Like it has a Jude tone to it, but like it's still this is more like I don't know. The other ones are dark. This is dark, but in a different way, and also like time loop stories aren't like you're not like making this from scratch. Like obviously time loop stories are a dime a dozen, except for you're making it your own. And I think that's one of the things I put together on my notes when I haven't actually physically written my review yet, but it's a positive review. It's coming out and it's soon. So there you go.
Oh, thank
The
you.
little preview on that. But like it's not like I said, if you think about like oh Jude's like this time loop thing. Oh my gosh, Jude's created this thing that's like it's not that. It's time loops are a thing. It's been in stuff. We've watched Groundhog's Day a number of times. You've seen this thing. However, you're able to make it your own in this story, which is really cool. And I think that you also did this thing where, like, I feel like time loop people, the stories are being told and they're figuring out, oh my gosh, we're in a time loop. They've already figured this out. Like, this has been going on. And you started off with a thing where you're like, you're not telling the origin story of Spider-Man over again in a movie. You're like, okay, it's the new iteration of Spider-Man where they're just like, he has powers, he's had these things. Here's a little taste of how it happened, but like we're in this because we don't need to hear it again. And that's what I appreciated. When I
Yeah.
got in that first issue, I was like waiting for them to be like, doing their normal life. And then all of a sudden, nowhere they find, oh my gosh, what's going on? We're living the same day over again. No, they're already in this thing. Like this is
Yeah.
happening. This has been happening. And that was refreshing to me because I was like, I just want to get into the meat of this. I just want to get into like what's going on here. Was that on purpose? Was that like a design that you
Yeah.
wanted to do?
I wanted you to feel like you had been in it for a long time because like I think the first scene is like Alicia, who's like the lead final girl, is like all the other teenagers are having very dramatic reactions and she's just like, I gotta take my shoes off. I'm gonna be running. I'm just like I think the first time you see all your friends die in horrible ways at prom night is probably really traumatic. But by the 11,000th one, you're just like, all right, like I wanted you to be in a place of like the same level of acceptance that they were in because that way I could like move around and make it very interesting and for once not make it entirely about trauma. Like it's a very bright, fun book because horror has room for that, frankly. Like there are bright, fun, campy horror movies by the dozen, and I felt like that might be something we need right now. I feel like after doing Be Not Afraid, which was literally just like the most depressing story I could think of, every time I thought, of something worse I could do to these characters, I was like, yes, let's do that. Let's amp it up. Let's make it worse.
It's refreshing because I did read that comic and
Yeah.
I was like, holy crap, this is like dark and deep and depressing. And then you read this there, and I know there is this playfulness that is also horrifying at the same time. It's like what if I wrote my notes I wrote when I was reading it, and it was like it is this like this hey, this is kind of funny, but at the same time, it's horrifying because you get to see your person like 11,000 plus times of seeing you or your friends die.
Yeah.
That's still horrifying every time. I'm sure you lose the, and they do in a sense lose their, okay, here it comes again, kind of thing. Oh, it's a monster this time, or we've never had. But that's the thing is like they get to the point where like, wait, this has never happened again, and that's
Yeah.
the stuff. I will say that if you did say, oh my gosh, they found out they're in a time loop, and they had these would have been longer, like it would have been not as good at first issue because it would have just been like an explanation of them in a time loop. Whereas you get the story, the ball rolling. I'm not going to point out the comic that it is, but I just read a comic book recently where I'm like, they laid the foundation, but then by the end of the first issue, you're like, nothing happened. Like there was like
Yeah.
no point. It should have been a double issue. It should have been a 48 page issue because the first 24 pages is literally just telling you what's gonna happen
Hmm.
potentially, and it kind of like gave you little nuggets of like what's going to happen. But then it's like at the end of the issue, you're like, dude, if this was like if I didn't like the creator team or this would have been like I don't know if I want to read this because is anything actually happening in this comic book? And that's not what we got out of this. This is like okay, we're in a time loop. It's horrifying. It's also playful, and we get by the end of the first issue, you're like, I really want to read the next issue, and that was done well, and I appreciate that.
Yeah, I mean, I think that it's very fun for me as a writer to do this because once you get that we're in a loop and the same thing is happening over and over again, you get to be like kind of a bad writer. You don't have to explain how you get to a certain point. You just get to like come in for a page or come in for a panel and be like, look, time traveling Nazis have taken over
Yes,
the gym. I don't know
yes,
why, but they did. And now that's what's happening. At some point in issue one, there's just, and this happens a few times through the series, having written it all. There's just like a page where it's just like panel, 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 panel. I'm not
yes.
going to explain this.
Oh, exactly. You have to
Um,
just figure it out on your own.
yeah. And
it, it
I think that's, it's fun. It's sort of like it's aimed for that short attention span thing almost,
which is kind
where
of funny.
you're just like,
I just read an
yeah,
article, or I said, I'm not lie. I read the title of an article
yeah.
because I just can't read everything. But it was saying that there was something about how like these short attention span things are almost as bad for you as alcohol. Did you see this thing where like the
No, I
stories
never saw this.
like image like stories on Instagram or whatever is like that quick like dopamine thing about just going through it is almost as like bad as just drinking like a bottle of liquor. It was like this weird thing, and I was like, wow, it's actually and it's probably true, but that's how we all live right now. Like I had
Yeah.
a stomach bug about 2 or 3 weeks ago. I actually had I haven't had a stomach bug in 20 years, dude. Like it's crazy. And then I had two in 2026 so far. It's been I mean I have a 5-year-old and a 2-year-old, so that's
Oh,
probably the reason.
yeah.
But I had to, so I was doing this and I was like, oh, I'll watch some. I was watching X Files. I'm like, oh, I'll watch some X Files in bed while I'm like, recovering. And I had to. I was just on my phone because it was like I couldn't keep attention to the X Files, but I also like it was like almost making me more sick. And
Yeah.
but like quick 5 second, 10 second, 30 second videos on Instagram
Yeah.
was doing it for me, and I passed the time with that. I think my algorithm changed completely on Instagram because of that day. Because like it was like cat videos or whatever it may be, and now I'm like seeing all these things, but you need that, and I think that you do accomplish that in this, where it's like you get these short like spurts, and if you had done like a 12 issue maxi series, and like each issue was a longer drawn out version of this time loop, it might just get repetitive and stale in a sense. Like whereas these small little snippets of it made it be like you got to be able to throw. No, you didn't throw 11 people. Jude doesn't have 1,000 things in here, like
No.
11,000 things in here. There's some skipping. It goes
Yes.
from like 500 to like 11,000. Like it's not like we have 11,000 panels on this thing. He did a pretty good job at making it so it was skipped a little bit. But like this is you have that, and that's what's cool about it. Like you get a lot out of this first issue without having to put a lot into the first issue. If that makes any sense.
Yeah. And I think that it is hopefully sooner or later we get to the point where it's a fairly character-centered work and a character-driven work, which I've always tried to do that. But in order to have time sitting with the characters and watching them grow as people, you have to like do something to make people realize that this is a comic and you're not just like drawing heads talking to each other for a full issue. So it's really it was a useful way to do character-centered storytelling because every time it started to drag, we could just be like, also this, you know.
Oh, in you see, I mean, I mentioned Groundhog's Day. Like
Yeah.
that's a very famous time loop story for people to get onto. It's not a horror story. I mean, it's horrifying
Yeah.
in a sense. Living the same day over and over again is pretty horrifying in
Yeah.
general.
Bill Murray goes to
But
some dark places.
yes, it
Yeah.
does. But this thing where he needed to change a couple of things. It seems like they keep trying to change a couple of things or try something new or see something new. And it's like it almost get exhausting. I mean, it is exhausting. I would guarantee you it's exhausting to not know what to do to get out of this time loop and to try small things as much as you can do. It's not like you can be like, let's fly to Japan because like
Yeah.
it doesn't let like it last that long. It's prom
Mm.
night, it's so on and so forth. But yeah, so you have that and you put us into that spot where it's like they are trying things and it finally breaks. And I'm not, that's a spoiler, but that's how the story goes. It finally breaks a little way away, but and you can figure out how they do that or maybe not in
Yeah.
the book. But yeah, it's like I said, I feel like I was in it. I felt like I've been living this, like you said, for a long time, and that they actually tried the things to get out of this loop, and it just never worked. It just and something happened. The cool thing is that something different happened every time, which is unlike other time. That's why I said like you made it your own. Like the time loop things basically have been like I just watched a X-Files episode about that where he has that time loop and the water blade breaks and you know the phone call and all that stuff. Like they're on prom night, but different things happen, which is
Yeah.
draws you in. If I should say that, yeah.
Yeah. And I think that yeah, you want to mess around with the structure and make sure that people don't always know what's coming next. But I think the sort of paralysis you get in the first issue where they are like they're naming them variables and they're trying to write down like, well, does anything change if I do this? Does anything change if JT actually wears prom clothes? Does anything change if, blah, 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 blah. And I think that's kind of adolescence is that you're stuck in the same scenario and it kind of feels like you have no control over your life and none of the decisions you make actually make a difference. And getting to the point where your actions have consequences is kind of what adulthood is. And they're slow, not as well, about as slowly as me, getting from adolescence to the point where they're actually like functionally in charge of their own lives and the world around them.
It, and I know you did teenagers because you mentioned that idea that like teenager slashers and so on and so forth, that teenagers, but it
Yeah.
does give it a spot where it's like they aren't all knowing, or they, well, at
Yeah.
least they think, because all of us as teenagers thought we knew everything, but like at least that they didn't know everything. It's not like you can be like, I've lived 60 years, so I kind of have some history of what to do in this situation. Like they're all still learning how to be people.
Yeah.
And at the same time, everything happening. I did want to mention like they've tried different things, and I said I don't want to spoil much, but they do get drunk at one point to say like maybe that changes things, and like so on and so forth. All I could think of in that section was like they don't have to worry about a hangover. You can get as drunk as you want because you're just dying tonight, and you're gonna wake up tomorrow morning like just another
I
day.
I think that actually starts to play a role in the plot at some point.
It's just like thinking like I'm like thinking to myself, I'm like, that's why I don't drink as much anymore. It's literally the only reason I like I as a 40-year-old person, I'm like, dude, waking up the next day after having like a couple of drinks, you're like, this is awful. I don't want to do this anymore. So I could just be like, if it's just started over tomorrow, like this morning started over, I'd drink a little bit more, which is
Yeah,
probably a good thing
no,
that it doesn't do that way. But no, I was just thinking to myself, I thought like literally as a 40-year-old, I'm like, that they're not gonna be hungover tomorrow. That's what I thought. I was like, that's not the
no.
full point, but like that's what I thought.
There's a character in there, Brandy, who's just like, I think like just has an ongoing gag where she's on every substance imaginable.
Well, I mean, like,
And-
if you thought about it, like 11,000
yeah,
times being in a time loop, you would try things, not just to get out
yeah,
of the time loop, but try things to be like, hey, if it's gonna reset tomorrow, I might as well do
yeah,
peyote. Like,
exactly. Like
if they're gonna try
nothing
tomorrow, I might as well
matters. We're all
steal
gonna die
something.
anyway. Live it up.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I might as well steal something. I might as well murder someone. I might as well do something that's stupid and crazy and whatever.
Yeah.
And if you're just gonna have the problem is I would do that crazy thing and the time loop would break and I'd be like, oh crap, now I've murdered this person and I've stolen
You
something
found the way out.
and I now have to live in prison for the rest of my life while all my
Yeah,
friends are
but
out doing whatever.
time
No,
loops
but
of dual mistress.
that made it. That's the fun part about it. Like I said, like you mentioned the horror, and I have mentioned this before. It was like comedy alone is hard to write and hard to get people to buy. And that's because, I mean, you're in a business of writing creative things, but also you, in order to do what you want to do, people have to buy this comic book, right? Like you have
Yeah,
to sell the comic book. It's not just as simple as
exactly.
making it and putting it out there. If you were a multi-billionaire and you just wanted to create comics for whatever, then you can do whatever. But like you have to make a limit. Is it comedy? And I've talked about this with Kyle Starks before about because Kyle is very good at like horror and comedy, and like comedy is so subjective in the sense that like there's not like a thing where like it's like funny to people or not funny to people. Like there's no like thing, but horror, there's so many different levels to it, in my opinion. Like there's horror like this, and there's horror like your last series, Be Not Afraid, and there, there's just levels of horror that I think that you can get into, and like comedy turns some people off sometimes, but when you mix it with
Yeah.
horror, I think that's where you get like that's a good spot for it in a sense. So there is this playfulness and this funniness to what's going on, but deep down, this is a horror comic book that's like
Yeah.
scary as hell to go through. And so I think that blend, and I think you mixed it just well enough, and I think it benefited by your artist. I think that the
Absolutely.
playfulness, the colors of that's happening, that the variant covers that are going on along with these issues add to that level of this is 90s scream
Mm.
style time loop horror, and I think it works out so well. And that's I was attracted to it because I'm a fan of your writings. Like that's the first thing, and then the title, but then the plot itself is what pulls you in, and then the playfulness that goes on here. You mentioned it already, but like that's important, right? The playfulness mixed with the horror is important to this series.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's what it is. And hopefully there's a good tonal mix of this, of horror that is over the top and taking the piss and silly and campy, and horror that's actually horrifying. Like it's hard, it's really hard to write something like this because the tones have to be so disparate and yet they always have to work together. The funny parts have to be absolutely clearly funny. The scary parts have to be absolutely clearly scary. You can't mix them together. You'll get mud. And I think it was Caitlin really who saved the project because whatever you threw at her, she could do it. Anything. And I mean, I threw a lot at her and she could just always do it. Um, the character acting's really good. There's a Godzilla that I get to have a Godzilla in my comic, and he's really good. There's character acting beside the Godzilla that's really good. It's just she really is able to capture anything you need her to do. And then after that, it's just like load it up with bright colors, make it pretty, send it out there, and it's gonna feel right for people.
Yes, yes.
Yeah.
And the Godzilla part, that must be cool for like you were talking about writing that stuff, but it must be cool for someone like Caitlin to be like, we're partnering on this comic book, we're gonna create it, da, 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 and you get to draw. Like it's you think about like if you created like Be Not Afraid had to have these characters and these storyline, you have to keep it in this. This could be like I get to draw Godzilla in this comic book. Like that must be such a badass thing to do. Like it's just one of those things that like you don't always expect to do that when you get a series like I'm writing this horror series, you could find space to be in. But a
This
series
is
like
my
this,
stupid dorky thing. My stupid
yes,
dorky, like Hitchcockian Easter egg is that everything I've ever written has an incredibly explicit reference to Jurassic Park at one point. And
that's
this is
amazing.
finally I get the actual dinosaur in there.
Yes, that's amazing. Yeah, so
Yeah.
it works out. It works out well in that sense. But yeah, I mean, so Ma, Be Not Afraid, and the neighbors are all at Boom. This is
Yeah.
at Only Press. Obviously, there's a bunch of good publishers out there and places to put things and things like that. This is not like a this is bad, this is good, whatever. But like, was it on purpose that this is slightly different than everything else, so it ended up in a different publisher, or is it just the way it worked? You pitched it and Only Press wanted it, and that's how that worked.
I don't know, like Boom does have a sensibility, and I love their sensibility. I love working within it. And I've been incredibly lucky to have three comics with them, and I hope I have more comics with them. Sierra Hahn and Allison Gronowitz, my editors on basically every comic I've done, um, moved over to Oni. And I knew I wanted to keep working with them. And one thing Sierra said is, if you want to pitch us something that's just different than anything you've ever done, go ahead and do it. So I was like, well, this is very different from me. So like, why not just throw it out there? And yeah, it actually got greenlit. I was surprised. I thought I was 100% every time I send in pitches, I send in a few at a time. And there's always one where I'm like, this is just for me. No one will greenlight this, but if they do, I will have a good time. And this was my, if they greenlight it, I'll have a good time pitch. And it got greenlit. you know?
Well, and that makes sense. I mean, there's always a story, and there's some behind the scenes stories sometimes where it's like, oh, they treated me horribly or something like that. But obviously, we wouldn't talk about that on the
No,
podcast.
no, I've
But
been treated really well everywhere I've
that
been.
makes sense, and
I
it
just,
does make sense that it's a little bit different, Jude. So like it's like okay, it makes sense that if someone's so used to what they're expecting from Boom in you, and then see this, it's like it is nice to almost be like, well, it's that Oni, so it's a different storyline, like that kind of thing. And I do think that Oni has a wider variety of what's going on, whereas you what you're writing over at Boom is like it does fit their mold in that sense. So it makes sense. But yes, it makes even more sense that your editors are now at Oni Press. So that helps a little bit more too. Yeah, that does go that way.
yes.
But yeah, it is different. That's why I kind of like made a point with it, and it was almost refreshingly different, especially because you're starting this 3 weeks after Be Not Afraid finishes.
Yeah.
Whereas Be Not Afraid was a little bit further after the Neighbors, and the Neighbors was after, like there was a little bit of a gap between Be Not Afraid and the Neighbors. So there's like, if they're the same in darkness and in depression and all that stuff, to go to this 3 weeks later might have been a lot for me, Jude. I'll tell you that much. If I was reading another 5 or 6 issues that were in the same style as Be Not Afraid, I might actually be like, I don't know, man. I'm gonna wait a little bit. I'm gonna breathe. I'm gonna read a trade on this one. But it actually was refreshing. It was like I said, I still get that horror, I still get that style from you, but it was like a little bit lighter and playful, which is nice.
Yeah, I mean, I think this is the first thing I've written that just like kind of pulls from what I really like about comics, and like mainstream comics, like superhero comics. Like I was like, I want to be able to do banter. I want a wacky team where everybody's a little bit different, but they all have a role to play. I want big action set pieces. This was kind of my, like Be Not Afraid, definitely like Junji Ito was a weirdly big influence on it. It was like Uzumaki, like I want a town where everything is going horribly, horribly wrong. That mood was, that has its antecedents in comics, definitely. But this is like a very comic-y comic because I wanted to prove to myself that I could do it, and also just because those are fun, and I want to have one that I've done that's in that vein.
Mm-hmm. And it makes sense. There is a point to it. So all comics, in my opinion, that especially independent comics, I say, well, mostly
Yeah.
independent comics, have deeper meanings to most of their comics. Like there's a story to be told, and you're
Yeah.
using comics as a platform to tell this story. It's honestly every Pixar movie is that way nowadays. It's like Pixar is this animated movie, but there's a deeper and darker, or not darker, but sometimes darker, deeper meaning to the story that's being told. And sometimes when you're so on the nose with things like with Be Not Afraid being dark and the artwork being the style it is and all that stuff, it's like that's what you get out of it. You get the story and you get the meaning behind it. This is more like there's a meaning behind it, but let's have some fun while we do it. And
Yeah.
that's where I feel like what's just cool about this. And not I love your comics, like that's nothing against any of your comics. I think The Neighbors was fantastic. Be Not Afraid was wonderful as well. So like there is a great you have a great lineup of comics that you put out. But this was like, I get to have a deeper meaning to it, but I get to have some fun with it too. And it's not like I get excited to read every issue, not like oh, I got to read this issue because I want to know what happens, but damn, this is going to be a moment. That
Yeah.
this is like I get excited, like I can't wait for issue 2, because of the fact that there's just so much going on, as well as at the end of this, I know we're gonna have a deeper meaning to what's going on, but like we're having fun along the way. You're
Yeah,
right. Yes.
exactly. Like there's yuckiness and sadness and unfortunate lessons about the world around you going on underneath the fun, and we'll get there. But it felt like I love Be Not Afraid. I think it's some of my favorite writing I've ever done in some of those issues. But it's also like it's meant to be a mood. It's meant to be heavy. It's meant to take its time and to have sort of that Cormac McCarthy thing where but that's not, nobody needs only one mood in their life. And it was actually really, I was working on the two scripts at the same time, and it was really useful because I was just like, all right, if something feels too dark or too sad, I can just move over to this one.
Yeah.
And
Well,
then.
it's true, and that's why to me, as for novels, when I'm reading novels, it's like I can't do back to back of the same author usually, or the same like if I'm reading stories that are in the same series of novels, I'm rereading. I just reread the Silo first book, Wool,
Mhm.
and then I wanted to read Shift, and I want to read Dust, and those three books are all in the same world, all the same vibe. but I have to read something in between that because like I can't stay in that spot the whole time. It's just this thing. Even lighter books, even books that are just mystery novels. I read a mystery novel about it from an author in Maine, and he has like 16 of them. And every single one of them, I read like a book and like two or three other books, and then a book, and then because I was like, I just can't live in the same place. And so the same thing goes for me. Like I think that Be Not Afraid in trade is going to be wonderful for people because I feel like they're going to be. I'm a huge fan of monthly comics. Like I love single floppy comics. Like that's one of my favorite things in the world. But then there's also some stories that just do so well in trade for people that it worked well in single copies, but it also is going to work so well in trade. And I think Be Not Afraid is that because you can live in that space for 6 issues, like
Yeah.
right away. And then you can go on to whatever's next. To me, it was like I lived in the space for the month and then I got like out of the space, and then I had to get back into the space, and then I had to get like that kind of thing. So
Yeah.
to me, it's like Be Not Afraid. I read it again as the whole trade. I was like, it was just so nice to get the whole story out and be in that space for a little bit of time and dive right in. Check your mind and be like, I'm going to be in this depressing area. But it was so wonderful and so wonderful written, and the illustrations are so beautiful in such a dark way that just like I don't know. Like I said, it's. I feel like you're one of the few people that could do this and get away with it. I'll tell you that much. Is that fair? Is that fair to say? But yeah, like I said, to me, it's like if you read this and then read Dead Teenagers, like okay, I'm out of that space. I've got some horror. I got some little lightness, playfulness, but there's a story behind it. I don't want a story nowadays that doesn't have something deeper to it. Like I don't.
Yeah.
To me, like there is some place for it, but like there is a place for the one of my favorite new series, Archie versus Minor Threats, because Minor Threats is amazing. Patton also and Jordan Blue series, and then you have Archie, and like Archie's like the nexus of the entire multiverse in comics, basically. Like there could be a Be Not Afraid Archie crossover, and it would work because of the fact that just like Riverdale seems like it's the middle, it's the nexus of all comics. And that for some reason, the Archie and the Riverdale crew just cross the border over to the next town, and bam, they're in the Be Not Afraid universe. And it's like, and it works. And it's so weird. I've written articles about this. It's like, it's just so weird how it works for every single crossover it's ever done. There's a place for that, but for the 99.9% of comics I want, or books, or stories, or movies, I want to be entertained. I
Mm.
want in my horror comics, I want to be horrified, but I also at the end want to be like there was something more than just someone getting their head decapitated. Like I
Yeah.
want something to be there, and so I'm getting that out of at least the first issue so far of Dead Teenagers. I got that out of Be Not Afraid and the Neighbors, and there's all these stories to be told, but you're telling them in different fashions, and this is just a new fashion for us as readers of your stuff.
Yeah, exactly. It's like if you like an artist, not every single one of their songs is going to be the same tempo. And, sometimes they're going to have an album that's poppier, and sometimes they're going to have an album that's just like them and a guitar doing the Bruce Springsteen Nebraska thing. And it's, for me, really exciting to always open up to a new vibe and a new aesthetic every time I take something on. And with Dead Teenagers, you're right, there is like an aboutness to it. And I don't want to spoil it, but a lot of it is about growing up and about looking at your youth and realizing that it was never as perfect as maybe your nostalgia cycle made it seem. Like maybe there was always something wrong there and you didn't have words for it at the time. Um, so I think that, just having them be totally inured to this violence when we start out, hopefully when they start to get to the violence that actually matters and that actually feels like loss, that, you know, adds to it. That you start to wonder whether any of this was ever actually okay, you
Well,
know?
I was just thinking you talk about memories, and I just had Daniel Kraus on talking about his book Partially Devoured, which is it's a memoir, quasi like 25% memoir, but it's 75% about the Night of the Living Dead and his love
Yeah.
for the movie, and he breaks down the movie and so on. But I talked and I was like, memories to me as my childhood are so vague. And there's some people
Mm.
I talk to who are like, December 25th, 1977. Like, how the hell do you remember that? Like, to me, I'm like, there's stories that I tell people over and over and over again. And my mom's like, that never happened. You know that, right? I'm like, why do I think in my mind this happened? And I change things and so on and so forth. I can't imagine being a teenager that had a time loop 11,000 plus times, and then you get older and you're like trying to memorize, like tell memories of these things that you did, and there's 11,000 different prom nights that different things happened. I'm just like, I feel like my life is stressed trying to remember my childhood. I can't imagine these people. And like those are the things I think about, Jude. I'm like, I don't know why I'm thinking about these things in this comic, but that's fun. In my opinion,
Yeah.
like you made a comic book that made me think in so many different ways while also being entertained. It's just a fun thing, and things that you're probably gonna like. This is like a might be the first time you ever heard someone say that. Like they're talking about the memories you might have 11,000 times over again. But
Well,
that,
it's
I mean,
so,
yeah,
yeah.
go ahead.
It's so weird to me because I had like the worst teenage experience. It was like so hellish. I was super gay. I got bullied out of school. And like I'm still obsessed with like Clueless and 10 Things I Hate About You and like the whole teen movie genre. I would always just watch it and be like, this is what being a teenager must have been like for everybody but me. It actually took me a while to realize that no, everybody else was having
Yes.
a horrible time too, you
Yes,
know?
yes. No, it was not fun
So,
for any of us. It's they look back on it, and it's like I have a 5-year-old, and I'm like, I want them to get older, but I also would love to be like, can you just skip like eighth grade to like college, please? Like that whole
yeah.
teenager part is just coming of age and things that you don't know and learning things and all this stuff. It's just like it's so in the moment you're worried about it, but also when you look back on it, I'm like, that wasn't fun. Like when someone's like, I want to be 18 again. I'm like, no, I don't. I do not want to be
Yeah.
down that age again. I just don't want to do it again. Or like living vicariously through their kids who are in
Hmm.
high school. I'm like, I don't want like I'd rather live vicariously through my parents who are like 65. Like I want to like about like I want to go forward. I don't want to go backwards. This is crazy to me.
Yeah, I've reached that point where I think the nicest thing to do would be to somehow travel back in time and become a boomer or a Gen Xer and just get a functioning adulthood before everything fell apart.
Like
But
that's a great story to go back and like figure it out and then get to live through teenager years. Like know what it's like to be an adult and then live through teenager years. Be like, okay, it's gonna get better, hopefully, and that stuff. But yeah, living in the teenager spot, and I think that's a great space to be in. And again, you mentioned this fits in that. Like you have your Scream, you know, I know what you did last summer. You know, those kind of movies where it's like these teenagers that horrible things happen to, and they get to most of them hopefully get to survive it and see what happens. That's where this fits. And I think Scream is one of my favorite horror movies of all time. And so
yeah.
like having that be a part of what like the theme of this book was is amazing to me because I just think that like the campiness of the upfront being like we're gonna make fun of ourselves in a sense, which is also kind of funny because they did Scary Movie, which makes fun of Scream, which is making fun of
Yeah, you're
like the
doing a joke
genre.
on the joke. Yeah.
Yeah, it's pretty great. But like, so that's what your next one needs to be a joke on this. That'd be great. That'd be amazing. The sequel will be a
Yeah,
joke on
Final
this one.
Destination. I'll throw in a shout out for that. It's not technically 90s. It came out in like 2000, but you were talking about X-Files. That was basically an X-Files script that they took away from Chris Carter and turned into their horror franchise. And it's that to me is like that's what comedy is.
Yes,
It's a
yes.
bunch of teenagers blowing up in a plane, you know?
And doing
But
stereotypical things like all this stuff you
yeah.
see in this book and moving forward you'll see like these teenagers doing stereotypical things about drinking on prom night or wearing prom dress like all the stereotypical things you see
Yeah.
but then you throw in like here's a monster or here's some sort of weird death or here's a car accident or whatever it may be that kills these people it kills these kids and they have to start over again it's just so much fun and how many issues is this one going to be
This one's gonna be 5. It's gonna
five
be
issues
quicker.
okay
Yeah.
yes is all your other ones 6 issues or is it
No, Neighbors and
okay.
Ma were 5. Be Not
Okay,
Afraid was just a
was
bigger
sick.
story, so it
Okay,
got
that's
cut
fine.
to
Yeah,
6.
I was trying to think. I'm like, for some reason, I'm like, there's some people who do like consistently do 6 issue series, and I'm just like, I don't know how you get the approval for that because I feel like most people are like, I want to do 5, and they're like, we'll give you 4. So I don't know where you got the approval to get 6 issues out of this. No, but yeah, so it's their typical length in that sense, and so issue 1 sets up it tells a story so there's a concise story in there and you get a beginning middle and end and you get the push towards the next issue which I like but not big enough of a cliffhanger where you're like I want it tomorrow like you get to some time to,
Yeah.
to eat it and like digest it and so on and so forth issues 2 through 5 similar speed are you slowing things down is it like what can we expect moving forward
Well, you have to have some scenarios that play longer than others to have time for the characters to like actually talk to each other and for decisions to be made and for um consequences to accumulate. There you go. It's early in the morning. No, it's not. But yeah, so there's a mix of longer and shorter coming up. You will get to settle down in these new realities and sort of get inside them, and there's a longer plot line that plays. But we're not gonna forsake, like the opportunity to just do like Red Dawn for 2 pages, like so.
Well, that's fine. Actually, I speaking about previous Daniel Krauss interview, I talked to him, but he had wrote a book called The Death and Life of Zebulon Finch, and it's like 15 novellas in one. Basically, a guy
Yeah.
dies and then doesn't actually die. He's undead and then lives for like ever and goes through like the moon landing and Woodstock and whatever it may be. And he's part of them all, but doesn't actually like influence them enough to change what could be real history. And that's what's fun about stories like this. He was able to tell like a dozen stories with
Yeah.
one character, and it's like this is what you're gonna have an opportunity to. Like you said, you could do like you could do this for a couple of pages and be like, we told a cool story, and I didn't have to do a whole 5 issue miniseries on it, but I got a chance to actually dive into this universe or this plot or story, which is really exciting. And I think that's what's fun about Dead Teenagers. Part of what's fun about Dead
Yeah.
Teenagers.
No, it's the great thing about it is that having set up a universe where time is kind of fluid and the storytelling's really nonlinear, you're allowed to like really experiment with pacing as much as you like. You can make it there's long, slow parts in this too. I hate to tell you. I could not write the first issue of this 5 times in a row.
No.
But there's also like hopefully moments where the plot accelerates.
Mm.
It's something where you don't quite know what's coming next. It's like a song where the time signature is always changing, so
Yeah.
you can sure. Yeah.
Which is fun. And I think that's and that, so I was looking. So my son was laying in bed with me last night, getting ready for bed, and I had my iPad up. I have a mount for my iPad so I can read comics at night and stuff like that. And we're reading there. And I'm looking through, and I'm like, I can't look at this comic book with you. I can't look at this one with you because like I'm like we give him nightmares with the comics that I have on there. And I'm like, and you won't know like some of them he won't know. Like 8 Billion Genies won't give him nightmares, but I have that on there. I'm like, and I was
Yeah.
like, I'm reading for my book club, my local comic book shop, the Fantastic Four series by Ryan North, the first volume, and I was like, oh, he knows what Fantastic Four is, so I can go through that pretty easily. But then I was looking through, I'm like, I realized I don't have a lot of big two comics to read. Like I just don't
Yeah.
do that right now. That
Mhm.
independent comics have just taken over my life in the sense that they're just more interesting to me. I think that there's just more stories to be told. There's no history to know. I mean, there's no future to be known if you have to. It's just the story that lives in this one place. And I was like, and that's what's fun. You can do things like this. I just feel like if you were to take this and be like, I'm going to tell this as the Fantastic Four, it just wouldn't work. And
Yeah.
that's why I think it's so much fun to be in this spot. And so you get to play with it, and I'm interested to see where it goes. In big two comics, sometimes you can be like, I know they're gonna survive at the end. Like you could just kill
Mm.
you at the end, they could just all die and you'd be
Yeah.
okay with it. You could just close the book and you'd be like, oh, that's how the story went.
That's the end.
You just
Told you it
can't
was
like, I
about
mean,
that
how many
teenager.
times does Batman, Superman, any of these people died and they always come back? It's not like there's no actual, they're like a horror movie in a sense. They're never always dead. Um, but no, that's what's fun about independent comics. And I think, and you also the variety, like you have the ability to tell a story like Ma or Neighbors or Beat Out Afraid, and then tell a story like this. It's just really fun to do. But Dead Teenagers comes out March 18th, the first issue, and then it's monthly after that for 5 issues, which is great over at Oni Press. I'm so excited. People should get it. It's phenomenal. I mentioned before we started recording, July 7th, I believe it is the trade of Be Not Afraid. So that's coming out too, which is really cool. You can obviously buy the trade of Neighbors and Ma as well. It's out there. But that must be excited too. Like for those who were trade waiting, you must be excited for people to actually get a hands on it this summer to read Be Not Afraid all together.
Yeah, it'll be nice. We had our release schedule was a little bit wacky because we had a hiatus in the middle, and I was like, oh, are people gonna still be there when we come back? But this, I think it is probably one of those things where you just want to spend like a weekend. It's just like the Bruce Springsteen, Nebraska thing where like you want to play that album from front to back. You don't want to pace that out. You don't want to stay in that vibe for too long. And then you can come back to reality. So I think that, yeah, it's one of those stories that'll probably play really well or maybe even better in a trade. I'm excited for that.
It's so funny. Yeah, final order cutoff on that now is April 6th. When I first read it, it's funny because I read some of these, so I get publishers will send them weeks before, a couple weeks a week before. Like Oni Press might send out Dead Teenagers to me soon. I mean, I obviously got it from you for this purpose, but like they might send it to me like tomorrow to be like, hey, it's coming out in a couple weeks. But trades, a lot of times I read through NetGalley because I have an account on NetGalley, and this
Oh,
one came up.
nice.
Be Not Afraid came
Yeah.
up, and I was like, oh, I'm gonna read it. And then I realized as I'm reading it, I'm like, wait, issue 5 is not even out yet, or something like that. I was like, this is crazy. I didn't even finish like I had to read this way before anybody else. And then I'm like, when does this book come out? I'm like, oh, July 7th. Jeez, but it didn't have the final order cutoff date yet. But that's actually up now, so it's April 6th for your local comic book shop. So tell them that you want. Be Not Afraid. It's fantastic. It's dark. The artwork is phenomenal and different than I say you'd expect, but like different than everything else in some sort of fashion. Like
Yeah.
it's just
Lisandro
yeah.
has this dark Americana vibe that's like nothing I've ever seen. And he didn't want to write horror. He turned this down. He was like, horror. But I was like, look at how many barns there will be. Barns,
Look at all
windmills.
the barns. Yes. That's phenomenal. I love that. That's amazing.
Yeah.
But yeah, and then so that's amazing. So like there's two different, like I said, two different styles, a little bit, two different vibes you get out of Be Not Afraid and Dead Teenagers. And so you get a little bit of
Yeah.
both from you on that
Caitlin
sense.
is so clear and
Yes.
almost classical, but just
Yes.
insanely flexible. You can do anything, anything, anything.
Mm.
And then the second you're in Be Not Afraid, you're in a very dark, pencily universe, you know?
Well, it's funny because
So,
I expected like that's like, I've read other things by you, so I've expected that to open the page up and be like, okay, here we go, we're in for
yeah.
a ride. And then I opened Dead Teenagers, and I'm like, wait, hold on, Jude actually did Jude wrote this? Because it was just so different. But then I got to the end, I'm like, okay, I can see some of those they're intertwined, vibes here and stuff like that are definitely you. And again, Caitlin's artwork is phenomenal, and the colors are so vibrant too that screams '90s as well, which is amazing. I love that too. So yeah, March 18th, you can grab that. The Neighbors is available on trade. Ma's available on trade. You've been writing books. You're an author as well. I love that. I haven't got a chance to read any of your stuff, but I will at some point. One of these days when there's a spot in the schedule for me to read stuff. Well,
Yeah.
I mean, quickly as we finish up here, what's it like comics versus books versus whatever? Like, is it, do you sit down and have a time? Okay, I'm going to write a book and then I'm going to write a comic book, or do you intersperse these things through there? Like, how does your schedule work like that?
I really like in 2024, I just said yes to writing three things at once, and one of them was a nonfiction book. And I'm not, probably not going to do that again because it was really messed up. But when I write journalism or when I write a nonfiction book, I have fun with it, but it's very servicey. It's very much about like, let's raise awareness of these important issues and let's be responsible to my community. And it feels a little bit more like something I do because I'm not very good as an organizer. I'm not very good as an activist because I don't like to be outside of my home. That's really a problem. So it feels like something I do out of responsibility. The comics are pure joy to me. The comics are something I just like. If they decided tomorrow not to pay me, I shouldn't say this, but I would still just be there. I'd have my face pressed up against the office window, being like, I have an idea. Like it's I genuinely writing the comics is maybe my favorite thing that I do because I'm allowed to tackle wider ranges of topics. I'm allowed to write a story about God and a story about nostalgia and a story about family, and they're all considered things I can do as long as I can pull them off. Um, and I get to work collaboratively and I get to watch these amazing artists come in and improve everything I've done. So it's yeah.
I mean, it's right, but like you're right because you can tell meaningful stories with a comic book horror vibe to it or whatever. But like some of the stories you're telling nonfiction, if you put those in comics, it might be like you're taking it lightly. In that
Yeah,
sense, like it's like one of those
exactly.
things that like there's still the stigma to funny books with comic books. I'm like, there's some very, very, very important stories being told in the world of comics, and there has been for years. I mean,
Yes, for
Mouse is a
decades.
like Bone, like all these stories are so impactful, and Why the Last Man, all these different things are amazingly stories that I absolutely love, and they have a heart to them and a meaning to them. But then people are like, it's a funny book. I'm like, God damn it, stop doing that. There is so much to this. However, there is a line sometimes where you're like, you have to be like, Okay, I need to tell this as a book. I
Yeah.
can't put this in a graphic novel format. This is not going to work. And there is a
Yeah.
hybrid of them. I read a couple of one of my early episodes of the podcast. I want to say it was like episode like 10. This is episode
Yeah.
272, Jude. So it's a long time ago. They wrote a book called Free Speech Handbook, and it was like a mixture. It had like comic book panels in text,
Yeah.
like with that was dispersed into text. So it was like a hybrid between the two, and that works too. But like sometimes the stories you need to tell need to be told in book format, and sometimes they need to be told in comic book format. That's just the way it is, right?
Yeah. That's
It
how it
is.
is.
Yep, it
Everything
is.
has its way that it wants to be told,
Yes,
you know?
yes, absolutely. And so you can find all that stuff online. You have a website, obviously, so you can go on that and find out all that information. But March 18th, at your local comic book shop, go in there, buy all of the covers of Dead Teenagers, sell them out so that they have to go into a second printing because that's just fun stuff to do. And then make the comic book worth $50 so that you can sell them all and make some money. No, that's all I can think of is
Hey,
like these
I've got a
people.
kid. I gotta pay for college
So
somehow.
I laugh at those people who are like their comic book randomly gets $50 for a single issue. I'm like, and all the comps they have, I'm like, how do you not just go to eBay and throw them up there and make some money off of this thing? It's kind of funny. But buy them all, and then again, the trade for Be Not Afraid comes out this summer. But it just like in anything comic books, you have to tell them way early that you want it so that they can get it. So April 6th is the cutoff on that. So tell your local comic book shop I want it so they can put it on the shelves. We are lucky enough here that I have the cover pull quote on the book. Dude, I was so honored. It's right on the
That
cover
is
on the
so
bottom corner. I
I
am so
remember
pumped about
that.
this. I'm so pumped
I
about this.
I think I picked that out.
Hopefully, hopefully you're a fan. But it was nice. It's one of those things that like I had these like small increments of like achievements that I wanted to get. Was originally the first one, like the first pull quote to be on a book. I'm like, oh, I don't care where it is. It could be inside or whatever. And then you're the second cover because I was actually on World Tree number 3. Then the third issue of or third volume of World Tree, I was on the cover. Now I need to be like on the front, the top is where the next goal is going to be. We got to these I see
I've, you
it's
just gotta file multiple reviews, and then the next one, the Dead Teenagers one, is just gonna be like different, like
no,
scenario one.
what I need to do is like an entire review that's just full of like one-liners. So they have to pick something, right? I mean, that's just like one-liner after one-liner after one-liner after one-liner. It gets very concise and very put through there. But it's funny because it was for a small minute there, I was like trying. Like I'd write the last paragraph and I'm like, I gotta put a line in there that they're gonna love. And now I'm just like, I just have to write. You can't do that anymore, and so on and so forth. But it was really cool to see. I like to see that every once in a while, and a lot of times I don't see it. Someone points it out to me, but I was able to get an advanced copy of it, so I saw that it was there, which is really cool in that sense. So buy it, everybody. Be Not Afraid and trade. Buy Dead Teenagers on March 18th. Buy everything from Jude. It's phenomenal. You are an outstanding comic book
Wiser
writer, and
words than this.
I'm so happy you were able to join us again here on the podcast, and we'll have you again on your next thing. I'm excited. We won't skip a thing this time. How about that? Does that sound good?
Sounds good.
Because we didn't get on here before when Be Not Afraid was launched. We got to talk
Yeah.
about it now a little bit, but not when it was launched. We skipped one. So let's do the next thing.
Next
We'll
one.
get on that.
Oh,
Yes, we'll get on that.
no.
Awesome. I really appreciated you joining us right here on the podcast, taking time out of your busy schedule to talk to us. We'll get you on again sometime in the future. But until then, hopefully launch of Dead Teenagers is phenomenal and everybody buys Be Not Afraid and trade. How about that? Sound good?
Yeah, sounds great.
Thank you, Jude.
Lovely to be here.